Good evening. Glad you all are with us tonight. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things before we begin. Am I a little bit loud tonight? There, now I'm not nearly as loud. A couple of things just because I've been asked some things, and I realize I need to tell you this report from the church in Canadian that we helped. And I want to tell you now because, there's an eclipse coming. And so if I don't tell you, you may never know, right? Because who knows what happens when there's an eclipse. No, I'm not too worried about the eclipse part. But the church in Canadian, I've talked to people there over the last few weeks, and we helped with a large sum of money after the terrible fires there, and they are doing really well. Matter of fact, obviously, there's still a lot of pain. There's some anxiety over fire still that you might expect because it's in dry country. Part of the problem is that the grass burned so badly in many places there is no grass to turn green. And there is green grass, but then there are those other places. But they have received hay and feed from 25 different states, which is wonderful. And a friend of mine the other day texted me. He lost his house, didn't have insurance, but he's doing fine. And he said, still has his barn, has his horse tank, as they called him. He said, I just baptized so-and-so in the horse tank. So there is some good coming from that. Then another thing I saw just the other day, there was a baptism on a Monday evening, maybe like this past Monday evening, and one of the teenage boys was baptized, and they filmed it, and his parents were talking before the baptism. And his mother said, I have tried and tried to get him to be baptized, but when he saw the generosity of people from all over the country, Christians giving in the name of Jesus, he said, I want to be part of that. And so he was baptized into Christ. So there are some really good things that happen even in tragedy. So tonight we are talking about leaders making leaders, and every one of us in this room are a leader or should be in one way or another. If you have any influence on the next generation, whatever generation that is below you, then you should be making leaders. But you can even help mentor leaders of people that are your age or even older than you are, depending on what position that you're in. There is always someone looking at you to see who you are or what you're doing, and the way we act around them, the things we teach, the things we intentionally say to them or try to lead them through can be so incredibly helpful and so important. I am truly the product of God putting mentors in my life. I've had probably 5 or 6 over the years, and because I was a teenager without a dad, there would be men that would intentionally step in to help me. And when I went to college, it was the same exact thing with professors. So tonight we think about leaders helping leaders, and tonight we're thinking specifically about Joshua and about Moses, and Moses helped Joshua. Moses was obviously that great leader of Israel, but Moses only had so many years to live and he would die, and it would be time for a new leader to come. And that new leader that would come would be Joshua. And from something we're going to see in one verse tonight, I think that maybe Moses didn't even realize all that he was doing with Joshua. And so Moses was helping Joshua along the way. So tonight what I pray is you are asking the question, how can I help or how can I participate in developing leaders? Now last week we know that we had 200 young people that were involved in LTC. That is one way. We have this incredible group of small groups that happen on Wednesday night in our youth group. That's also incredible. We have teenage class, or we have elementary classes, and we have toddler classes and baby classes, and all that's part of it. But there is also so much more we can do as we help the kids in our own houses, but also as we maybe coach t-ball or whatever it is. But even more so, as we are leading people in the way of the Bible to know Jesus, we are mentoring along the way. So one of the things that you see in the life of Joshua and how Moses taught him was we need to entrust others with authority. Isn't that one of the most difficult things to do, to give authority to someone, to let them do something, and we don't step in and say it has to be the way we want it? That's really hard to do because I have a picture in my head as to how something is supposed to be, and while I might give you the authority, you need to do it exactly like I do it. But that's not what it means to entrust others with authority. I think in the Bible of Exodus chapter 17 and verses 8 through 10, where this is what happened with Moses and Joshua. These are just examples of things. It says, then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow, Moses says, tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him, and he fought with Amalek while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Now you may remember what he does. Moses keeps his arms up, and whenever they start to fall, then they lift his arms back up. But I want you to see what Moses does here, God does through Moses, is he says, Joshua, you go choose the men. I'm not choosing them. You choose the men. You decide who it's going to be, and then you go do the work. Wow, in some ways that would be kind of scary. It doesn't say that this was unusual for Joshua, but Joshua goes out and does it. Now Joshua was under Moses' authority, but he was allowed to fulfill his tasks. That's a hard word to say, tasks. He was under the authority of Moses, but he still goes and does the job. It also makes me think of an example that's not on your screen tonight that may be the most famous of Joshua, when Joshua and Caleb were some of the spies that went and spied out the land and saw what was there, that they were sent on a mission where, at night it wasn't like Joshua could phone back to Moses and tell him what was happening. Moses had to wait and hear what was going on. And so one way that you make leaders is you entrust them with authority and let them start making decisions, and you just let them go with that decision. Now here's another one. Include others with you when doing important tasks. One of the things you have heard me say before that I am so thankful for with my parents, who were extremely evangelistic, typically on a Monday and a Tuesday and a Thursday night, they were out having home Bible studies with people, telling them the story of Jesus. And I would go along even as a kid. And my job, when they would go and my mom and dad would study often with a couple, they would say, David, you have a job in this Bible study. Your job is to keep the kids quiet. Keep them in the bedroom quiet so that they don't bother their moms and dads, so their moms and dads can learn about Jesus. You go do that. And so sure enough, often those folks would be baptized into Christ. And you know what my parents would do? They would congratulate me and literally, my dad used to love to do this, literally pat me on the back and say, good job, because I had a part in them coming to know Christ, including me. Do you see what's happening there? You are mentoring and bringing up another generation in the way you do that, whether they be your own kids, other kids, or whoever it may be. So I want you to see what happens in Exodus chapter 24 in verses 12 and 13. This is a fun one. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction. So Moses rose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up onto the mountain of God. Now I've read the Bible a lot of times. And you would think that I would know some of these things, but I remember the exact moment when I was in college and I read this verse and had no idea Joshua was there. I remember the professor saying it, and I pulled out my own Bible and found it in my own Bible and went, well, sure enough, Joshua was there too. Never even thought about that. When Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 Commandments, he is not by himself. Joshua is also there. Include others with you when doing important tasks. If you're going to go and visit someone in the hospital, take someone with you so that they also have that experience. If you're going to go help someone, a neighbor, whoever, go mow the lawn for someone that maybe is in need, or maybe one of our widows or whoever, take someone with you. Don't do all of that yourself. Include other people. It is training. It may not appear to be training, but that's what's going on. He was training Joshua in all of this. And you might say, well, Yeah, well, that was good that he took him up on the mountain for the 10 Commandments. God wanted him to have someone with him. It's good that he entrusted him to do all these things. But understand that Moses was entrusting experiences and knowledge to be used after he was gone. If we do everything for the next generation, they will know how to do nothing. Now, they may do things differently than we do. And we have to say, okay, that's all right. We'll also quietly think you didn't do it as good as we did, because I know the generation before me thinks that about what I do, so I understand that. But at the same time, we've got to be training where they don't get it at all. If we just leave the kids at home to play on their phones or to play with their toys or whatever, they won't get it. They won't know. And so often that is exactly what happens, because I guarantee you most of the time it is easier to do ourselves than it is to take someone else along. Whether it be a child or an adult, I just think I can move faster alone than I can with someone else. But Moses is seeing a long-term picture here that someone's going to need to know. And imagine what it was like when Moses dies, and then you have Joshua as an old man, and he's saying, I remember what it was like on the mountain whenever God came down and gave the 10 Commandments. I remember that. I remember what it was like when we fought the Amalekites, when I chose the men, and this is how I did it. That memory goes on way past the life of Moses, but only because Moses is mentoring him. Here's another. Discuss serious situations with future leaders. Now, I'm giving this example doesn't completely explain everything here, but I want you to see this. That in Exodus 32, this is when they're up on the mountain and they're going to come down, and Aaron and the rest of them are involved in worshiping a golden calf that they did not ask for, that they should not have had. But it says, when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there's no noise of war in the camp. But he said, it's not the sound of shouting for victory or the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear. All at once, what he's saying is, they're not down there in war. They are down there worshiping something. The purpose of singing was to worship something, and they're not worshiping the one God, Yahweh. They are worshiping a golden calf, is basically what he's telling him. One of the important things to do is to talk about serious situations with younger people, or with people that you see will someday be in leadership. You talk about it when they're young, you talk about it when they're old, you talk about it all along, sharing that knowledge. So one of those great mentors of mine was a man named Don Vincent, who's now passed. He was a professor of mine in graduate school, and then my office was next door to him in the congregation where I worked before I came here for 7 years. And he would come by my door, and he'd say, Duncan, let's go to the hospital. Or he'd say, let's go drink coffee. I always knew what it meant. He had something he wanted to share with me. When I was in college, I would say to him, could I meet with you this afternoon? And he would say, I'm on my way to return a book at the library. Hop in the car and we can talk then. It was always about having undivided attention with me. He did it with other people too. To teach something. To say, I remember when this situation came up in a church one time. And what he was doing was preparing me for situations that would come up later. And before we went to Brazil, he would be helping me talking about things that had happened to him when he was a missionary there. And then later, it was about what would happen in the United States. We had this issue with this couple back years ago, or we had this issue with this man or this woman, or with this doctrine or whatever. And he was preparing me. He was talking about serious situations that helped me to understand and be prepared for other things. Now here's another one. Correct mistakes gently. You know, sometimes we talk about the difference in generations. Every generation is different. This younger generation right now that's becoming adults, Seems like they need things a little more gentle than others have in the past. I kind of get that because I don't like someone in my face, to be honest. Some of you know of an old basketball coach by the name of Bobby Knight. He used to throw chairs and strangled a player one time, and that's just kind of the way it was in the day. He was a coach at Indiana. It was where he became famous. He was at Texas Tech as well. That kind of coaching does not work on me. Not even a little bit. What that makes me want to do is just quit. Because I don't like that. That is not the way I function. When correcting someone, do so gently. When you get to the New Testament, matter of fact, you're even going to find a verse that says correct people gently. So it's even a biblical thing. But in Numbers chapter 11, verses 26 through 30, there was an interesting situation that came up. It says, now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad. The reason they stayed in the camp is because they had funny names, okay? Eldad, Medad. And the Spirit rested on them. And they were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp, which they thought they weren't supposed to do that. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, the son of man, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, my Lord Moses, stop them. But Moses said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. Instead of saying, Joshua, you don't even know what you're talking about. Do you know how many years you've been with me and you don't know how important and how great it'd be if everybody could prophesy? Instead, he just says, wouldn't it be great if everyone could do that? I'm sure Joshua stood there thinking, what did he just say? But he was teaching him gently. Gently works with most people, not with everyone, but with most people. Moses used wisdom and humility while Joshua learned. It would have been easy for Moses to have said, oh, Joshua, thank you for letting me know because I'm the one in charge. I'm the power here. But he doesn't do that at all. Instead, what he does is he corrects him in a very wise way. So now as they come closer to the time that Moses will die, and there will need to be a new leader, it seemed that it would be obvious that Joshua was the one. It seemed like everyone would know that, but in Numbers 27, verses 18 through 20, here's what the Bible says. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight. You shall invest in him with some of your authority, that all the congregation of the people may obey. Now the verse just before this, what Moses says is, who's going to take my place? As in, he maybe had not figured out all along how he was training Joshua to be the next leader. And God is like saying, isn't it obvious? You take Joshua. You take him, the son of Nun, a man in whom has the Spirit. Put him in front of the whole congregation. And you say, this is the one. You see, Joshua would be doing what Moses could not do. But what was important was that Israel needed to see that Moses and Joshua were in union with each other. It's important for the mentor to let others see that they approve of the mentee. That others see that you are together as one. That it is not a coup to take your power, but instead this is an intended thing that is happening so that God be praised and God be honored. Because if not, do you know what happens? Every time one preacher retires or goes and the new one comes, there are some people that say, oh, they're not good. And sometimes preachers I've known in the past have enjoyed causing havoc in a church where they used to serve because it's hard not to have the focus as they had before. I even know of a preacher who completely destroyed a congregation because of that. They need to see the union. You have trained them, and you have left it to them. Whatever your role, elder, preacher, grandma, grandpa, whatever it is, that you are in union together. So, my question for us tonight is, what am I doing for the future? How am I trying to help the future, whether they be my own children or grandchildren, kids here at church, or if I'm talking about other leaders who are already adults? What am I doing for the future? And if I say, well, not much, then stop complaining about the present state of the world, because you're not doing anything to make it better. What am I doing to help right now? Tonight, if you are ready to come to Christ, to the one who obviously is the great mentor who has taught us and led us all the way to the cross and to the empty grave, and you are ready to be baptized into Christ, or if you need prayers, come as we stand and sing.